Good afternoon. Today I'll be talking on T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Man. The Hollow Man is a poem published in 1925, roughly halfway through the modernist decade of the 1920s. It was T.S. Eliot's major poem between The Wasteland, which was published in 1922, and his conversion to Christianity, which took place in 1927. The hollow men of the poem are shown as trapped in some form of a between world, a limbo as it were, or perhaps a purgatory between death and life, existence and nothingness, light and darkness. It is tempting to approach T.S. Eliot's The Hollow Man as a sort of a succinct rendering of his magnum opus, as it were, The Wasteland. Like The Wasteland, the poem began life as a series of shorter poems. Early versions of the part of The Hollow Man are included in the collected poems 1909 to 1962. These and the other shorter verses were published in Doris's Dream Songs in the chapbook in 1924. They share a number of common features: five-part structure, the use of somber allusions, alongside snippets of nursery rhymes like London Bridge is falling down, which occurs in The Wasteland, or Here We Go Round the Mulberry Bush, which occurs in The Hollow Man. The references to a sort of wasteland world populated by rats and lost souls. Yet it would be a mistake, perhaps, to interpret The Hollow Man as a mere add-on or an appendage to that earlier and more famous poem of Eliot's. Although it is not about development or progress itself, Hollow Man is essential about some form of stasis and immobility, a sense of being trapped without any movement. The Hollow Man is also a poem about repetition. The title The Hollow Man is given twice, once on the poem's title page and again before the first line. The poem has two epigraphs. One is Here We Go Round the Prickly Pear. It is repeated as prickly pear in the line that falls between the two Here We Go lines. This is the way the world ends, is repeated not once but twice at the end of the poem. Allusion to Joseph Conrad is repeated too, for life is very long, like Mr. Coe's See Death from Heart of Darkness. Quotes from Conrad's fiction, this time from An Outcast of the Islands. It was published in 1896. Indeed, a clue to the prominent themes of The Hollow Man is provided by the poem's two epigraphs, both significant ones. The first epigraph is the foreword declaration of the villain Mr. Coe's death given by an African boy to Marlowe, the second narrator of Conrad's Heart of Darkness. This allusion teases us with the possible readings of the poem, which I'll be telling a bit later in this talk. The other poem, the other epigraph as well in this particular poem has to do with perhaps Eliot himself, when he speaks of a reference to the familiar child's cry on Guy Fawkes' night, a penny for the old guy. Now, in this context, it will be fruitful for us to know that effigies of Guy Fawkes, the conspirator arrested late on November 4, 1605, for his involvement in the gunpowder plot to blow up King James I and the Houses of Parliament, are burnt each year in Britain. But with this epigraph, it begins to look less likely that empire is the theme of Eliot's poem The Wasteland. But the references to straw effigies which were burnt does pave the way for the poem's stuffed men with the headpieces filled with straw. The first four sections of The Hollow Man describe the situation of the titular men dwelling in the dead land, recalling perhaps the wasteland of Eliot's earlier poem, and desert space, cactus land, again shades of the wasteland here as well, in a sort of twilight world between death and dying. There is a tumid river, Eliot says, which might be interpreted as an allusion to the river Styx, the river across which the dead were ferried to Hades. The final and the fifth section of the Hollow Men is a bit different. It begins with a song, perhaps suggesting a dance around the aforementioned cactus, around the prickly pear, says Eliot, at the ungodly hour of 5 in the morning. We then get a series of between statements, which could not be more appropriate for this poem about interim states. So, what is being described here? One possible interpretation is that Eliot is talking about that other interim state between death and life, and not the end of our lives, but at the beginning. This is not to say that such an analysis of Eliot's lines decides the matter once and for all, but the fact that the series of between statements, almost like a chant, is punctuated by a reference to life itself. Life is very long, says Eliot, and to the words of the Lord's Prayer, for thine is the kingdom, suggests the almost divine miracle of human life. But this has to be balanced against the wretched existence of the modern hollow men who are, like one of the speakers from the wasteland, neither living nor dead. One is even tempted to propose that these hollow men are the souls of babies who perhaps never made it, whether because they were aborted or maybe because they died before they were born. Therefore, intrinsic likenesses between the hollow men and the wasteland are many. Most of the likenesses are readily apparent to anyone who has read the poems. The poems, for example, have the same desert landscape characterized by images of desiccation and ruin. The images of the cactus, for example. Their spiritual values are similarly distorted and perverted. Even the inhabitants who dwell in these two desolate worlds are almost similar. For the crowds of white-collar workers endured to their daily office routine in the unreal city of the wasteland, passing in the first section of the wasteland, are likewise hollow wraiths going through their daily activities in a dreamlike trance. It would be prudent, perhaps, to analyze the important drifts of the Hollow Men as a poem. Now, the Hollow Men opens with the familiar picture of a desert landscape in which a chorus declares their spiritual status to be that of hollow men, straw effigies, caught in a stance of frozen immobility. The exact words are shape without form, shade without color, paralyzed force, gesture without motion. Eliot derives this picture almost entirely from Dante's Divine Comedy. As a matter of fact, the first section of the poem is to all efforts a direct transcription of the third canto of Dante's Inferno, of the dark, desolate plain lying between hell's portal and the river Acheron, which flows as a formidable barrier between the plain and the hell's abyss. Here Dante and Virgil perceive vast hordes of souls futilely pursuing a great whirling banner. Their cries fill the air, reverberating in the starless air. And when Dante asks, why are they lamenting so bitterly? Virgil replies that they are those souls who on earth were neither spiritually alive nor spiritually dead, that is, neither good nor evil, and who consequently are altogether therefore devoid of any spiritual meaning. As a result, these creatures may never pass beyond the river into the true realm of death, referred to variously in the Hollow Men as Death's other kingdom, Death's dream kingdom, and Death's twilight kingdom, where punishments and rewards are meted out to the evil and the good, for they have known neither good nor evil when they were living. Indeed, declares Virgil, and I quote, mercy and justice scorn them both alike, unquote. Dante's souls, like the souls in Eliot's poem, are thus hollow too, empty of any real spirituality. The notion of spiritual hollowness seized upon by Eliot to bring a devastating castigation of his own age is thus enormously reinforced by its reminiscence of the Commedia's gloomy setting. The salient features of the middle sections of the Hollow Men likewise derive from this source. The opening lines of section 2, for example, again come straight from Dante. this time from cantos 30 and 31 of the Purgatorio. In these cantos, Dante and Virgil, having climbed the mountain of Purgatory to the Garden of Eden situated at its summit, witness the triumphal progress of the church in the form of a chariot drawn by a griffin, whose twofold nature represents, perhaps simultaneously, the human and the divine nature of Christ. The eye of the Holoman spokesperson himself, is in effect a modern Dante. For like Dante, he too presents a dream kingdom and is part of that kingdom in experiential terms. But unlike his medieval predecessor, who lived in a world in which religious efficacy was possible, the Hollow Man spokesman does not. The author of the Commedia, by means of his fervent vision of Beatrice's eyes, is able to traverse both Inferno and Purgatory and to arrive at last in paradise. The Hollow Man Dante is forever immured within his desolate limbo, barred even from crossing the river immediately into death's kingdom of hell, into which lost or violent souls may go, and whatever dream visions might conceivably be vouchsafed him must of necessity be meaningless or misleading because of his spiritual incapacity. In this last of meeting places, he suggests, speaking of himself and his fellows, and I quote, "We grope together and avoid speech, gathered on the beach of this tumid river," unquote. Thus Eliot suggests, is the modern Dante in the sterile landscape of contemporary civilization. The Hollow Man effectively remains an elusive poem, like much of Eliot's other poems. It perhaps represents even more of a challenge to comprehend and close analysis than the Wasteland does. But it moves Eliot's work forward into a more spiritual territory, perhaps. 2 years after The Hollow Man was published, Eliot would join the Church of England. The same year, he would renounce his American passport in exchange for British citizenship. The between man, the Anglo-American poet of the age, would be between no more. So essentially, another interpretation of the Hollow Man might just as well be focused on a point in Eliot's life when he was beginning to end one stage of existence and about to embrace another. Be that as it may, the Hollow Man as it stands today as a text is multifariously nuanced. It has various shades or levels of implication, and the contemporary relevance of the Hollow Man rests almost entirely on the ability of each one of us to read and understand and interpret the poem in the way we like it the best. Thank you.